Happy fall, everyone. Welcome to our next November AuthorConnect Chat. I'm Yuri, the Order Management Specialist at BookPal, a company with a mission to share the transformative power of books with organizations and their people. Today I'm joined by Julie Winkle Giulioni, author of Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Yuri.
Julie helps organizations enhance learning, engagement, retention, and the bottom line. Her consulting firm, Designer Rounds, specialize in enterprise-wide learning experience and custom trainings. Named one of Inc.'s magazine's top 100 speakers, Julie has traveled from Russia to China to Lithuania and beyond, helping leaders around the world help others grow. She's a sought-after speaker for constantly delivering creative insights as well as practical takeaways that change behavior. Prior to founding Design Rounds, Julie led product development at Achieve Global, managing cross-functional and international teams of marketing, creative, instructional design, and production professionals. She directed the organization globally with creation and launch of products that have been used in tens of thousands of organizations. Before that, she held multiple training management positions and was a professor and department chair at Woodbury University. Julie is a regular contributor to The Economist, The Conference Board, Training Industry Magazine, TD, Smart Brief, and other publications. Some industry awards that she has received are in recognition, including Human Resources Executive Magazine Top 10 Training Products, Global HR Excellent Award from the World's HR Congress, New York Film Festival, and Elle Guide recognition for development e-learning at its best. Today, Julie will share some insight from her book, Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. Then we'll jump into a Q&A. Plus, please don't forget to submit questions for Julie at any time during the webinar. At the end, we'll be able to answer all of those, as well as have 4 signed copies of her book, so stick around. We'll give those away after. Just in case you have to jump off early, please don't forget we are recording and this will be added to our site later. All right, Julie, it's such an honor to have you. Feel free to start whenever you want.
Great. Thank you, Yuri, and to everyone at BookPal. I'm really excited about the opportunity to visit with you all about our book, Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And, career development has been a passion of mine since I first began my work career. Of course, at that point, I was on the other side of the equation and had this insatiable appetite to keep growing and developing and taking on more and learning more. And I was fortunate enough to have a series of leaders to whom I reported who were just natural developers. They just did this without even thinking about it. And it wasn't until I was almost 30 years old that I hit a boss who didn't behave like that and suddenly had that contrasting experience that really helped me to understand the importance of a leader's ability to really promote the kind of environment that lets people grow and reach their capacity. And so since that time, that's a space that I've been working in. And I've been really delighted to have been able to co-author Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go with my co-author, Beverly Kay. And so let me just start by talking a little bit about sort of why we wrote the book. The basic premise that we have really is that there is an inextricable connection between business and people. And when we grow our people, our businesses are going to grow. And so a commitment to developing others, really from my perspective, is probably one of the most important things that leaders can do to have a really profound effect on the business. In fact, I would argue that there's a really compelling business case for career development. The research is compelling that career development really does deliver real results. For instance, with regard to engagement, we know that career development is one of the top 3 drivers of engagement. When people feel like their careers are being attended to, they're just more engaged. And what that engagement does is it unlocks the discretionary effort, that extra time, the energy, the care, the creativity that people can either volunteer to the organization or withhold from it. When we're attending to people's careers, when they're feeling engaged, they're going to give more to the enterprise. And of course, this probably is a big old duh, but when people feel like their careers are being attended to, they're more satisfied in their roles. I also did a little bit of research maybe 18 months ago, and what I found was across the generational spectrum, 70% of employees actually believe that career development is a fundamental responsibility of managers. So it's not a nice to do by any stretch anymore. Employees expect it. And we also know that growth, learning, career are among the most important things that new employees are looking for. If we want to recruit top talent, that's even more important than the salaries we can offer to prospective new employees. We also know that career development is one of the primary reasons people either stay in an organization or leave. And some work from LinkedIn actually found that across the board, across organizations, employees will stay longer if they feel like an organization and if they feel like their manager or boss is investing in their career. We also know that customer satisfaction is a reflection of employee satisfaction. So when we attend to people's careers and build that level of satisfaction and loyalty on the part of our employees, that translates to the customer as well. And career development also hits the bottom line. You know, we know from a variety of different resources and research studies that when employees have their careers attended to, when there's development and effort, we see greater productivity, greater sales, greater profitability. And so there's a clear and compelling business case for career development. There's also a human case. You know, I'm sure like myself, all of you really have a desire to grow, to learn, to expand what's possible. And so as my co-author and I sat down and looked at the business case, the human case, the tremendous power of career development, we also saw that it just wasn't happening to the satisfaction of most employees. And so that was sort of our starting point when we wrote Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, was we wanted to do some research and really get to the bottom of why isn't this thing that we know is so good for us, so good for our employees, so good for our organizations, why isn't it happening? And so we polled hundreds of managers across the US and abroad asking that very question. And I'm sure no one's going to be surprised when I share with you that what the issue was, number one, above all others, it was time. In fact, 3-to-1 on all of the other responses we received. We heard managers tell us time and again, yeah, they'd like to do it, but they just simply don't have the time. And you know, it's hard to argue with that, isn't it? I mean, this is the most time-starved generation of managers ever. And if we continue to think about career development as one more thing on an already long list of to-dos, it's never going to get done. And so we knew that time was one of the issues that we really needed to grapple with. The other one that we discovered, and that I'm sure is intuitive to many of us, is that when it comes to career development, there are a lot of these ingrained expectations, kind of images that we have in our minds. You know, when I say career development, most people immediately think ladder, don't they? Because forever we have associated career development with climbing that corporate ladder. You know, every 18 or so months, you're tapped on the shoulder and invited up to the next rung. Problem is that ladder is broken, you know, and it has been for some time actually, between the downsizing and the right sizing and the outsourcing, with boomers not only living longer, but having the audacity to work longer as well. You know, when you look at the way work is organized more organically now, the gig economy, the ladder just doesn't work. And yet it's almost like career development is I don't know, kind of a trigger word, trigger expression that just hijacks our brains and takes us to this space of career development as promotion. And of course, in today's flatter organization, that's just not the case. Then when we overlay additional things like the processes and the paperwork and the programs that have been created by organizations to help ensure that career development happens, we take this idea of career development and it starts to become pretty complicated and complex. And so what we wanted to do was really step back and strip it away. And when we do, things get a lot simpler and a lot more doable. Because when you think about it, when you think about the people who helped you grow the most, whether they were bosses and supervisors or professors or coaches or mentors, when you think about what they actually did, it was pretty simple. Pretty human, actually. You know, when I ask folks this question around the world, I hear things like trust. You know, they trusted me. They had confidence in me. And I trusted them to have my back. I hear things like, you know, what really made a difference was they listened. They created the space for me to understand myself and what was possible better. They likely gave feedback, offered coaching and perspective. You know, they threw you into the deep end in some cases, you know, letting you figure out what you were capable of doing, but stood there with the life preserver just in case you needed it. The truth is that career development doesn't really live in the domain of the promotions and the processes and the paperwork. In fact, when you think about it, I'll bet you those things aren't the answers to this question here. What it is, it's a relationship. Career development is really a relationship between an employee and a supervisor, a manager, or a leader. And it's a relationship that plays out through conversation. And so at the core of our book is this idea that careers are really developed one conversation at a time, over time. And so we knew that if time, you know, was really the issue, the most pressing issue managers were facing, we had to help them figure out how to slip more of this kind of conversation in and offer them a framework for doing that, you know, that operated at the speed of business. And so we created a simple framework for thinking about the conversations you can have, the questions that you can ask as a leader that can introduce and cultivate more conversation into the workplace. And so to introduce that model, what I'd like to do is give you a chance to kind of discover it a bit yourselves. And on the screen there, you'll see that there are 18 questions. Questions that you might be interested in asking or answering, questions that might just kind of catch your eye. As you glance over the screen, just take a moment to identify three questions that capture your imagination. Again, maybe it's something you'd like to ask your folks about, or you wish your boss was asking you. Just identify 3 questions that capture your imagination, capture your eye, and make a mental note of the color associated with those questions. And I'll give everybody just a moment to do that now. Feel like I should hum the Jeopardy theme or something, but I won't. I like you all too much to make you endure that. All right, I'll give you just another moment or so. All right. So again, make a mental note about the color or colors of the questions that captured your imagination, because those colors map to 3 parts of the central model that we focus on in our book, a model that can help busy leaders figure out how to incorporate more conversation into their days and into their relationships with others. So if you gravitated toward the green, if those green questions captured your eye, then you really appreciate the value of hindsight, the first element of this model. Hindsight is the questions, they're the conversations that help people look inward and backward at who they are, where they've been, what they love, what they're great at, what those superpowers are, what they're most interested in, maybe what they're not interested in as well, what their values are. And when you think about those hindsight questions, in many ways, they're really similar to the questions we ask during the interviewing that we do of employees. You know, we want to know all about who they are and what they can contribute and where they've been and what skills and abilities we can tap with them. And yet, once we hire folks into the organization, it's frequently sort of end of discussion, literally and figuratively. And so hindsight questions are about how we can keep the conversation and keep the interview going throughout one's career. Then the yellow questions are foresight. So if you gravitated toward those yellow questions, you really appreciate the value of foresight. Whereas hindsight is about helping people look inward and backward, foresight is about helping folks look outward and forward. At what are the needs of the organization? How's our organization changing? What's the mission and strategy that I might fit into? Where's our industry going? And even bigger picture than that, what's going on economically, politically, geographically, environmentally? Because it's all of these kinds of factors that create the guardrails or create the playing field within which career development is even possible. And then finally, where hindsight, where I've been, what I love, what I'm good at, intersects with foresight, what are the needs going forward, that's what we call insight. And those of you who found yourself gravitating toward the white questions really appreciate the value of insight. Insight is that sweet spot to be mined for possibilities and opportunities and activities that drive development and learning. Hindsight, foresight, and insight. Simple, straightforward model that works on a couple of different levels. You know, on a mega level, you could introduce these questions into your annual individual development planning or career development planning conversation to turn those into really powerful dynamic dialogues rather than just kind of reviews of the form, which is what happens so frequently. Or you could ask one hindsight, one foresight, and one insight question to create a cohesive conversation, but a short one, a 5-minute one that drives momentum and an interest and motivation forward. Or on a real micro level, you could take any one of those questions, ask it with the spirit of curiosity, and you're doing career development. You know, the key here is you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, you don't have to have any of the answers. But what's not negotiable is having those great questions. And that's what this framework helps you think about. Now, I would say there's almost no wrong question, no bad question. Any question is going to help to spark a dialogue with one exception. There's just one exception to that rule. And unfortunately, it tends to be the question that most managers default to when they think about having a career conversation. It's the most pervasive one, and yet at the same time, kind of the most perverse one. You probably know what I'm talking about. We've all, asked it, we've all had to answer it. And it's that question, where do you see yourself in 3, 5, 7, 10 years, right? In my mind, that question is like the corporate equivalent of what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, from the time we're kids, we're sort of trained to connect this idea of work and growth with a role. And so you grow up wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer. I wanted to be an elevator operator, but that's a whole other conversation. But we have this sense of what we want to be, and that's success in the workplace. And then, as leaders, we're surprised when people arrive at the workplace and they want to be the vice president of that, or the manager of this, or the director of the other thing. We've been in training, it's in our DNA. And yet when we start having these conversations about what people want to be, those are really limited and limiting. Because as you know, there are only so many roles. Somebody might not be ready when the role is available, or the role might not be ready when the person's available. And the truth is, according to recent research, 85% of the jobs we're going to be doing in the year 2030 have not yet been invented. And so preparing for what you want to be could be sending folks down a dark alley without as much possibility as we'd like. And so the key is get rid of that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you see yourself? And instead start focusing on what people want to do. Once we start people talking about what they want to do, suddenly those are hope-filled conversations. They're filled with possibilities. Because when we understand what people want to do, a savvy manager can generally figure out a way to introduce those opportunities, those possibilities, those challenges, those activities right into the envelope of the job that someone has. So we don't have to wait for the ladder to take us somewhere else, to make a move to another role to grow. If we can help figure out what people want to do, then they can be growing right where they are, right here and now. But what that means is we've got to shift the conversation. We've got to change out the question from what do you want to be to what do you want to be doing? What kind of work do you want to be doing? Under what kinds of circumstances? With whom? What kind of technology might you be interested in learning about? What kinds of problems do you want to solve? What kinds of challenges do you want to take on? What do you want to achieve? What does career success look like to you? When we shift the conversation like that into the space of doing, suddenly there's tremendous possibility that will allow people to grow, as I said, right here in the now, the here and the now. They can grow anytime, they can grow anywhere, and that, sort of speaks to the subtitle of our book. That's exactly what organizations need and employees want when it comes to career development. So Yuri, I'm hoping that there are some questions that have come up during the course of this short presentation.
Yes, there have been. Let's first start with a question that came in from Cassie. And her question was, since the initial edition in 2012, when y'all first came out, have you heard any new feedback that has kind of sparked more conversations in career development?
Definitely, Cassie, and thank you so much for asking. When we were asked to write the second edition, it really caused us to step back and do some soul searching and also some landscape searching as well. And the couple of things that we learned in the process was it hasn't gotten any easier for leaders and managers. Their plates have only become more congested. They have more that they have to juggle. And so the need for a solution that's simple, that allows them to take advantage of the workflow, the envelopes of time they're already interacting with employees, that becomes even more important. What did change was just in those short few years, the employment landscape has changed with a huge increase in gig workers and the contingent workforce. And so one of the things that we really needed to look at is how does career development fit into that? If someone isn't a balance sheet employee, does that mean we withhold development? And I think we came to the conclusion that customers don't know the difference, whether someone's a gig worker, a contractor, or a balance sheet employee. They're all your people representing you. And figuring out ways to offer development to them is a powerful way to sustain your reputation in the marketplace and also to retain the top talent required to do that. And then the third thing, Cassie, that became clear over the first several years that the first edition was out is that managers are in a tremendously powerful position to make change with individual employees and within their groups. And yet when the organization conspires with that, at an organizational level, when we've got a culture that really supports development, then that helps everybody do a better job of this with greater ease. And so in the second edition, we have a whole new chapter that speaks to the kinds of cultures that really encourage and enable this kind of career development. and have a self-assessment that speaks to and helps you kind of calibrate how your organization is doing against several hallmarks of that kind of a culture. So thanks, Cassie. Lots of changes since the first edition.
Yeah, I mean, reading the book, there's totally so much more in there, which I would encourage everybody to read. The next question is actually based off of your book and goes with your presentation. In your book, you kind of preface that managers should also be encouraging employees and helping them identify. So the next question would be, what if people don't know their strengths themselves as managers? How can they help identify those in other people?
That's a great question. This whole idea of self-awareness, we could go on and have a whole other session about that, couldn't we? You know, one of the things that many managers have internalized as a misconception, a mistaken belief, is that somehow a lot of this responsibility falls to them. And so frequently managers feel like it's all on them to tell people what they're good at, to give them feedback about what their, opportunities are, to point it in the right direction. And so no wonder a lot of managers just say, oh man, I can't fit that in. So one of the things that savvy managers do is they realize that it takes a village to grow a career, that it's not all on them, and they distribute the responsibility for this. And so a really powerful way that a leader can help take some of the burden off themselves and even off of the individual, him or herself, for identifying those strengths, is to teach people how to gather feedback from others. So frequently we think of the manager as being the only person who offers feedback. But the truth is, coworkers, customers, suppliers, and vendors, they're actually a lot closer to the employee, working their shoulder to shoulder, seeing their strengths play out, seeing where things kind of fall short. And so one of the really powerful things that a manager can do is enable those around them to go gather some of this perspective themselves, to round out their own self-perspective with the perspective of others, so that they can kind of reconcile that and have a clearer view of who they are and the value proposition that they bring to the organization.
Totally, and that goes back to the different sites that you bring up, hindsight, insight, and foresight, and kind of recognizing the strengths in that. Along with that, how can you then also propel that motivation to be continued? Like once you have and you've asked and pulled out the strengths, how do you continue the conversation of motivation in, I guess, the rest of your organization and your employees?
That's a great question, and it's probably the most pivotal one, because it's one thing to start something, it's quite another to keep it going. And I think sometimes in organizations, not just around career development, but other initiatives, we do a good job of starting it, and then things kind of peter out. And then we lose credibility in the process, and pretty soon people are just kind of holding their breaths, waiting for the next, flavor of the month. So when it comes to career development, once you start that conversation and start to spark some awareness, some interest, some motivation, the key is to continue exactly what you did to start it, to continue that through conversation. And it doesn't have to be huge, long sit downs. In fact, those once a year things, while important to the organization, in terms of manpower planning and succession planning and whatnot, that's not what helps people grow. What helps people grow are those small moments where you're walking down the hallway with someone and you could chat about the weather or the football game, but instead you say, hey, I wonder how things are going with regard to XYZ, picking up on a previous conversation. Or when you see someone struggling, to intervene with a question about, which skills might you want to develop that would help this be easier for you? Or when someone's starting a project, to draw upon what you know about their interests to say, okay, how are you going to take that further? How are you going to build the skills that are going to help you move in the direction of your goals through the course of this project? So the way we keep the momentum going is through ongoing conversation, but it can be very small conversations, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, layered over time, actually create more trust and momentum and an energy than those, kind of big one and dones that we might have gotten used to in the past.
Yeah, I love that tip. It's just so hard, I feel like, sometimes for managers to have those organic, natural moments. So those 2-minute sidebar conversations, I can definitely see how that continues motivation and growing and pulling out the strengths, along with reading your book, which is very helpful as well. Julie, the final question we have here, if there's one thing you could leave us today, is there just like a quick tip, quick last minute second that you could leave us with?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we've got to remember that career development is a relationship that just plays out through conversation. All it takes is a question. That's all you need to bring to the table. A question in the spirit of curiosity, and you've opened the door to career development.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julie. We really do appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then for everybody else, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar next week, so please stay tuned. You can visit our website at book-pal.com to purchase Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go for your organization, or you can send our sales director, Carlin, an email at carlin@book-pal.com to learn more. If you would like to see our next Author Connect or more Author Connects, you can also visit our site at book-pal.com, AuthorConnect-2019. Our next one will be on December 3rd, and we'll be chatting with Mo Bundle, the author of Snowball System. And then we will now also be announcing the 4 different winners who actually also get to receive a special little gift from Julie, which will be little cards, deck cards, along with the book. And so those 4 winners are Julie Jones, Ray Gates, Neil Bruggus, Allison Emery. And if you could also go ahead and email us at carlin@book-pal.com, we can go ahead and coordinate the send outs of all of those. So Julie, thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll see everybody next time.